The sun had just begun to rise over the wide, open fields, painting the horizon in soft shades of pink and gold. The lone farmer stood by his weathered fence, squinting against the early light. His life had always been quiet, shaped by the rhythm of the land and the needs of his small farm. Years of tending crops, caring for animals, and facing the challenges of solitude had made him self-reliant. He knew the smell of fresh hay, the sound of horses' hooves, and the feel of soil between his fingers. It was a life that many might have considered lonely, but to him, it was a life of routine, of simple purpose, of quiet comfort. Yet, despite the calm of the morning, a sense of anticipation seemed to hang in the air, subtle and unexplained. The farmer adjusted his worn hat. Taking a slow breath of the crisp morning air, he could hear the distant calls of birds and the gentle rustle of leaves in the soft breeze. His mind wandered, as it often did, to memories of people he had known long ago, friends and neighbors who had moved on, left the area, or simply drifted out of his life. The isolation of his farm, once a choice, sometimes felt heavier as he thought about human connection. It was during this quiet hour that he first noticed her. From across the field, moving gracefully through the tall grass, came a figure taller than most women he had seen. She carried herself with a natural confidence. Yet there was a gentleness in the way she moved, as if she were part of the land itself. Her hair, dark and thick, shimmered in the early sunlight. Her eyes were alert, taking in every detail around her. She seemed strong, almost larger than life. Yet there was something in her posture, something in the way she glanced around nervously, that suggested she was not entirely at ease. The farmer felt a jolt of curiosity. He had lived in this area for many years, and he rarely saw anyone walking near his land, let alone someone who looked so unusual and striking. He watched her carefully as she approached, unsure whether she was a traveler, a neighbor, or someone who had wandered from her home. The moment stretched, and he noticed the way her gaze occasionally drifted toward him. It was not a glance filled with fear or anger, but one that hinted at a mix of curiosity and caution. She stopped a few feet from the edge of the field, near a cluster of wildflowers that seemed too delicate for the rough terrain. Her presence was commanding, yet not overwhelming. The farmer cleared his throat softly, trying to break the quiet tension that had settled between them. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady but gentle. She turned her head and nodded, acknowledging him without words. There was something about her that was both familiar and mysterious. He could sense a story behind her eyes, a life shaped by experiences he could only guess at. Perhaps it was the way she moved, with purpose yet with hesitation, or the way she seemed to study him as carefully as he studied her. He realized that he had been waiting for this kind of encounter, even if he had not known it. A person who was not part of his routine, who brought with them a sense of life beyond the boundaries of his farm. She finally spoke, her voice calm but carrying a weight that made him listen intently. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said. "I was just passing by and I needed to rest for a moment." She gestured toward the grass near the fence, as if asking permission without words. The farmer nodded, stepping aside to allow her space. He noticed the way her eyes flicked to his small farmhouse in the distance, as if assessing whether he was friend or stranger. Her presence seemed to awaken something long dormant in the farmer. He realized that despite years of solitude, he had not lost the ability to feel interest, to feel connection. They were two people from very different worlds, yet in that quiet morning, a bridge seemed to form between them. The tall woman, with her strength and grace, and the quiet farmer, rooted in his land and routines, were suddenly aware of each other's existence in a new, meaningful way. As she settled onto the grass, she let out a soft sigh. Not of fatigue, but of relief. The farmer crouched nearby, offering her a bottle of water he always carried. "It's warm today," he said, his voice gentle, careful not to startle her. She took the bottle and smiled faintly, an expression that carried gratitude, but also a hint of shyness. It was a small gesture, yet it was enough to make the distance between them shrink slightly. They began talking, slowly at first, each word measured and thoughtful. She told him her name, though she did not immediately explain where she was from. He introduced himself, keeping the conversation simple, as though testing the waters. The dialogue was light but meaningful, punctuated by moments of silence where the two simply observed the land, the rising sun, and each other. In these silences, the farmer felt an unexpected comfort. He realized that even though he had lived alone for so long, the presence of another person, especially someone so different from himself, could be deeply reassuring. He learned that she was connected to a nearby native community. She spoke briefly of her family, her responsibilities, and the challenges she faced growing up with expectations that sometimes felt heavy for someone her age. He listened, fascinated by her honesty and openness, and by the way she spoke without pretense. There was strength in her words, but also vulnerability, a combination that intrigued him deeply. The morning passed with small shared tasks. She helped him check on a few of the animals, showing surprising knowledge and confidence. He noticed how naturally she handled the chores, how her large hands moved with skill and precision. There was a rhythm to their actions, a sense of cooperation that felt new and exciting to both of them. Even in this simple work, a connection was forming, built on trust and shared experience, rather than grand gestures or dramatic events. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting brighter light over the fields, the farmer found himself reflecting on the moment. He realized that he had been living a life of solitude not because he was lonely, but because he had grown accustomed to it. Yet, meeting someone who was both strong and vulnerable, someone who carried her own burdens yet sought connection, reminded him that human contact was irreplaceable. It was not about dependence or convenience. It was about understanding, respect, and the simple joy of sharing space and time with another person. She eventually rose to leave, thanking him for the small kindnesses he had offered. The farmer watched her walk back toward the path leading away from his farm. There was a sense of anticipation now, a feeling that this encounter was not a one-time event, but the beginning of something more, a story that had yet to unfold. Both of them felt it, though neither said so aloud. It was a quiet acknowledgement, shared in glances and gestures, that their lives had intersected in a meaningful way. As she disappeared from sight, the farmer returned to his work, but his mind lingered on the encounter. He felt a mixture of excitement and contemplation. The day, which had begun like any other, now carried a new energy. There was hope in the idea that connection could happen in the most unexpected ways, that trust and friendship could grow slowly but surely between people who initially seemed so different. And so, the morning ended not with a dramatic event or an immediate bond, but with the quiet promise of something deeper. Two lives had touched, briefly yet profoundly, leaving an impression that would not easily fade. The farmer knew that this was only the beginning, that the world was larger, and his heart perhaps more open than he had realized. The tall, strong, and gentle woman had brought a spark into his quiet life, a spark that hinted at companionship, understanding, and the subtle beginnings of trust. In the solitude of his farm, surrounded by fields and animals and the soft hum of nature, he felt something he had not felt in years: anticipation, a feeling that life could still surprise him, that connection could still find him in the most unexpected ways, and for the first time in a long while, he looked forward to the next encounter, to the next conversation, to the slow unfolding of a story that was entirely their own. After that first unexpected meeting, the lone farmer found himself thinking about the tall, striking woman more often than he cared to admit. Her presence had left a subtle mark on him, one that lingered in quiet moments while he worked the fields or tended to the animals. At first, he tried to dismiss it as curiosity, a fleeting interest in a stranger who had wandered near his land. But as days passed, he realized that there was something more, a connection forming, fragile yet persistent, like the first shoots of grass in spring breaking through hardened soil. The Apache girl, too, found herself thinking about the farmer. She had not expected to find anyone who treated her with such quiet respect, someone who did not rush her, judge her, or demand anything beyond her own comfort. She had spent most of her life surrounded by expectations, family duties, community rules, and traditions that often left little room for personal choice. Meeting the farmer had reminded her that there could be moments of genuine human kindness, small yet profound, that could make a difference in someone's day. It was not long before she returned to his land. She came under the pretense of needing help with directions to a nearby trail, but in truth, she also sought the simple pleasure of conversation, the feeling of being seen without expectation. The farmer noticed her approach from a distance, his heart catching slightly at the sight. This time, there was no hesitation, only a silent acknowledgement that she was welcome. "Good morning," she said as she reached the edge of his field. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of someone who had lived with caution for much of her life. "Good morning," he replied, tipping his hat. "You're back sooner than I expected." She smiled faintly, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "I thought I might stop by again. If that's all right?" she added quickly, as if worried she might have overstepped some unseen boundary. "Of course," he said, his tone steady. "I don't mind your company." They fell into an easy rhythm as they moved around the farm together. She asked questions about the crops, the animals, and the tasks he performed each day. He answered patiently, showing her how he rotated the fields, checked on the health of the livestock, and repaired fences that the weather had worn down. There was pride in his work, a quiet satisfaction that came from tending to something tangible and alive. She watched with interest, occasionally offering suggestions or asking to try her hand at certain tasks. Her presence brought a new energy to the farm. The animals seemed to respond to her calm confidence, and even the fields felt brighter under the light of her curiosity. She learned quickly, her large hands surprisingly gentle as she fed the chickens or guided a stubborn horse into its stall. The farmer was impressed by her combination of strength and sensitivity. She could lift and carry with ease, yet she handled every task with care, mindful of the life around her. As the days passed, they shared small stories about themselves. She spoke of her childhood in the nearby community, of her family's traditions, and of the responsibilities she bore as one of the older children in her household. The farmer listened with genuine interest, occasionally sharing pieces of his own life. He told her about growing up on the farm, the lessons learned from the land, and the quiet joys of solitude. Though their experiences were different, they found common ground in their understanding of work, patience, and the satisfaction that came from seeing results after effort. One afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, they worked side by side to repair a section of the old fence that had been damaged by a recent storm. The task required focus and cooperation, and they fell into an unspoken partnership, passing tools back and forth, offering encouragement and gentle guidance. She laughed softly when she accidentally dropped a hammer, and he responded with a light-hearted joke that made her grin. For a moment, the tension that sometimes accompanied new acquaintances vanished entirely, replaced by a simple, shared joy in accomplishing something together. In these moments, they began to notice the small details about each other. He observed the way her eyes lit up when she learned something new, or how her expression softened when she spoke of her family. She noticed the quiet strength in his hands, the patience in his voice, and the way he seemed to find contentment in routines that might have seemed dull to others. These observations deepened their understanding of one another, forming the basis of trust that would grow stronger over time. One evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and purple, she confided something that surprised him. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "I feel very alone. Even when I am surrounded by my family, I feel like there is no one who truly understands me." Her voice was calm, but carried a sadness that was hard to ignore. He nodded slowly, feeling a pang of empathy. "I understand that feeling," he admitted. "I've lived most of my life alone, and sometimes it can weigh on you. You think you are fine, but there's always a part of you that longs for connection." There was a pause, filled only by the sounds of nature around them, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of birds, and the soft whisper of the wind. In that silence, an unspoken bond formed, a shared understanding that transcended words. Both had lived with solitude, both had known the weight of responsibilities, and both recognized in the other a kindred spirit. Over time, the Apache girl began to visit more often. Each visit was slightly longer than the last, and the conversations grew deeper. They shared stories of childhood adventures, of challenges overcome, and of dreams for the future. She told him about her hopes to learn new skills and explore the world beyond her immediate surroundings. He shared memories of friends long gone and the lessons he had learned from years of working the land. Through these interactions, their trust grew. They began to rely on each other, not out of necessity, but out of genuine interest and care. She felt safer in his presence, knowing that he would not judge her or impose his own expectations. He felt a sense of comfort in her company, appreciating her curiosity, her laughter, and the way she brought life to the quiet corners of his farm. They also began to share lighter moments, humor, small competitions, and playful challenges. She would tease him when he struggled to lift a heavy bag of feed, and he would joke about her exaggerated caution when approaching the animals. These moments of levity strengthened their connection, reminding them both that companionship could be joyful, even in the simplest tasks. As the weeks went by, their friendship deepened into something more subtle and profound. It was not yet romantic, but it carried an emotional intimacy that neither had expected. They began to sense each other's moods, to anticipate needs, and to offer support without being asked. The farm, once a place of routine and solitude, became a shared space where laughter, conversation, and mutual respect thrived. One day, she arrived carrying a basket of herbs she had gathered from the nearby hills. "I thought you might like these," she said, placing them gently on the table in the farmhouse kitchen. He looked at her with surprise and gratitude, touched by the thoughtfulness behind the simple gift. It was a gesture that spoke volumes, revealing her care and attention without the need for grand declarations. "Thank you," he said sincerely. She smiled, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. I wanted to help," she said softly. And help she did, in more ways than one. Each visit, each shared task, each conversation built layers of trust and understanding between them. They learned to communicate not only with words, but through gestures, expressions, and small acts of kindness. The quiet bond they formed became a source of comfort and strength, a reminder that even in a world filled with rules, expectations, and isolation, connection could still blossom. As the sun set over the fields, painting the sky in soft purples and golds, the farmer and the Apache girl sat on the porch steps, watching the last light fade. Neither spoke for a long while, yet neither felt the silence as empty. It was a silence filled with recognition, understanding, and the subtle promise of something more. Something neither of them could yet name, but both felt growing within their hearts. It was during these moments, in the quiet of shared space and gentle conversation, that they discovered the power of trust. It was not dramatic or flashy, but it was real, steady, and meaningful. And for both of them, it was enough for now to simply be present, to share time and space, and to allow the beginnings of connection to unfold naturally. Through shared work, conversation, and small acts of kindness, the farmer and the Apache girl were slowly building a bond that went beyond simple friendship. It was a connection based on respect, understanding, and genuine care, one that would shape the course of their lives in ways neither could yet imagine. And as the night settled over the farm, with stars beginning to appear in the clear sky, both of them felt a quiet contentment. A sense of hope lingered in the air, subtle, yet persistent. They did not know where this connection would lead, but for the first time in a long while, both felt that they were not entirely alone. They had found in each other a companion, a confidant, and a gentle reminder that trust and understanding could grow even in the most unlikely of circumstances. The days grew longer and warmer, and the rhythm of the farm continued, each sunrise bringing new chores and quiet routines. Yet, for the lone farmer and the Apache girl, life on the farm had begun to feel different. Their brief, cautious encounters had slowly turned into daily visits, and each day seemed to deepen the bond forming between them. It was no longer just about curiosity or politeness. A genuine connection was growing, one that neither could ignore. One afternoon, Dark clouds rolled across the sky, heavy with the promise of rain. The farmer had been repairing a section of fence near the pasture when he noticed the girl approaching. She moved quickly, aware of the storm's arrival, and he waved to her, calling out, "You'd better come inside. The rain is coming fast." She nodded, quickening her pace. Together, they hurried toward the farmhouse, the first drops of rain beginning to fall. Once inside, the wind howled outside, shaking the windows, and the sound of rain striking the roof filled the room. The cabin, small but sturdy, felt safe and warm in contrast to the storm outside. They both shook off water from their clothes and settled near the fire, which the farmer had lit earlier in anticipation of the coming cold. For a moment, neither spoke. The storm seemed to create a bubble around them, a quiet space separate from the outside world. The Apache girl looked into the fire, her face illuminated by the flickering light. The farmer observed her, noticing the way her eyes reflected both strength and vulnerability. He had seen her handle challenges before. Yet here, trapped by the storm, she seemed human in a way that was almost new to him. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I don't usually feel safe around strangers," she admitted, glancing briefly at him. "But here, with you, it's different. I feel calm. I feel like I can just be myself. I feel like I can just be myself." The farmer nodded slowly, understanding her words more deeply than he expected. "I know what you mean," he said quietly. "It's not easy to trust someone new. It takes time, and sometimes, a lot of patience. But it's worth it, when you find someone you can." Arminter. Arminter. Her gaze met his, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in her expression. She seemed to weigh her words carefully, then spoke again. "Sometimes, I feel like I'm starving. Not just for food or comfort, but for touch. For someone to care in a way that is real. To feel that connection." "I know it sounds strange." He remained silent for a moment, considering his response. He did not want to say the wrong thing, but he also understood exactly what she meant. Years of solitude had left him familiar with the same longing, not just for physical presence, but for companionship, understanding, and the quiet reassurance of another person. "You're not alone in that feeling," he said finally. "I've felt it too. Life can be hard when you don't have someone to share it with. It's more than just company, it's understanding. Trust. Someone who sees you, really sees you, and doesn't judge." She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "That's exactly it," she said. "Someone to see you. Even when everything else feels heavy or confusing." The storm outside raged on, yet inside the cabin, there was a calm intensity. They talked for hours, sharing stories that were both ordinary and profound. She spoke of her childhood, of learning responsibilities early, and of moments when she felt overwhelmed by expectations. He listened without interruption, offering understanding rather than advice, letting her words fill the space without judgment. He, in turn, shared pieces of his life that he rarely spoke about. He told her about growing up on the farm, the hard lessons learned from nature and the seasons, and the loneliness that had accompanied decades of isolation. There was no need for dramatics. The stories were simple, yet each revealed a depth of character and resilience. Through these shared experiences, they discovered a profound similarity in their lives. Both had faced challenges that required patience, strength, and quiet determination. Both had learned to rely on themselves, yet both secretly longed for the comfort of companionship. As the hours passed, the rain slowed to a soft drizzle, and the cabin filled with the warm glow of the fire. They moved closer, drawn together not by obligation, but by the unspoken need for presence. She shifted slightly, resting her hand near his on the wooden floor, and he did not pull away. The gesture was small, tentative, yet powerful, marking a step forward in the emotional intimacy that had been developing slowly over weeks of interaction. "I trust you," she said quietly, almost as if confessing a secret. "I don't usually let people get this close, But I feel safe here. He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Trust is earned, not given, he said softly. And you've earned mine. There was a pause, filled with unspoken emotion. The warmth of the fire, the intimacy of shared stories, and the quiet understanding between them created a moment that was both delicate and profound. They were not rushing anything, there was no sudden movement or dramatic declaration, but the connection between them had grown undeniable. It was emotional, heartfelt, and completely real. Over the following days, the storm became a memory, but the impact of that night remained. The Apache girl visited the farm more frequently, staying longer each time. They continued to work together, laugh together, and share experiences. But now there was a deeper layer of understanding. She was beginning to trust him not just with her time, but with her feelings, her hopes, and her fears. He, in turn, allowed himself to open up in ways he had not in decades, recognizing that vulnerability was not weakness, but a bridge to connection. One afternoon, while tending the animals, she paused and looked at him with a serious expression. I want to be honest with you, she said. I sometimes feel lonely in ways that are hard to explain. I want someone who can understand me, not just in words, but in presence. To feel cared for, even in the smallest ways. He understood immediately. I know what that feels like, he said. I've spent years on my own, and there were times when I longed for someone to simply be there, not to fix things, not to judge, but just to be present, to care. She smiled faintly, a mix of relief and recognition in her eyes. Exactly. I think that's what I've been searching for, even if I didn't know how to say it. From that day forward, their bond deepened in subtle but meaningful ways. Small acts of care, bringing water, sharing meals, helping with chores, took on greater significance. Each gesture was infused with awareness of the other's feelings, a silent promise that they were there for one another. Their relationship was no longer just about companionship. It was about emotional connection, mutual respect, and understanding that transcended words. They began to anticipate each other's needs. When he saw her struggling with a heavy task, he would step in without hesitation. When she noticed him tired or discouraged, she offered encouragement and quiet support. It was a partnership built on empathy, trust, and a shared recognition of each other's humanity. One evening, as the sun set and the farm was bathed in warm light, they sat together on the porch steps. Watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold, she leaned slightly toward him, her hand brushing his in a natural, unforced gesture. I feel stronger when I'm here, she admitted. Not just physically, but emotionally. I feel like I can face things I might not have been able to alone. He looked at her, moved by the honesty in her words. And I feel the same, he said softly. You remind me that connection is worth seeking, even after years of solitude. That evening, they did not rush into declarations or promises. There was no need. The emotional bond they had formed was solid, rooted in trust, vulnerability, and shared understanding. It was a connection that would grow naturally, slowly, and with care, one that respected each other's boundaries, while allowing intimacy to develop at its own pace. As night fell and the first stars appeared, the farmer and the Apache girl sat in quiet companionship, listening to the soft sounds of the farm and the gentle rustle of the wind. In the stillness, they both felt a sense of belonging that had been missing from their lives. The connection between them was no longer fragile. It was a quiet, resilient bond, capable of withstanding the challenges that life might bring. They had discovered something rare and precious: the power of emotional intimacy, built on trust, understanding, and the courage to be vulnerable. It was not a fleeting feeling, nor was it dependent on circumstance. It was real, steady, and enduring. And as they sat together, watching the night deepen around them, both knew that their lives had changed in a profound and lasting way. Life on the farm had settled into a rhythm, but with the growing closeness between the lone farmer and the Apache girl, not everything remained simple. Their bond, though strong and meaningful, began to attract attention in ways they had not anticipated. In small rural communities, news traveled quickly, and even quiet actions could spark whispers. The Apache girl was no longer just a visitor. She had become a familiar presence, and not everyone viewed this with acceptance or understanding. One morning, as the farmer was tending to the animals, he noticed her approaching with a slightly troubled expression. Her steps were brisk, yet hesitant, as though she carried an invisible weight. "Is everything all right?" he asked, setting aside the tools he was holding. She shook her head gently. "There are people in my community who have started asking questions," she admitted, "about why I visit your farm so often. They are concerned, I think, that I am stepping outside the boundaries expected of me." He frowned, understanding immediately. Even though their connection was rooted in friendship and trust, it was clear that others might misinterpret it. "I see," he said softly. "That is always a challenge when people do not know the full story. But we can handle it carefully, without causing harm or conflict." The Apache girl nodded, though worry lingered in her eyes. She was used to balancing her own desires with the expectations of her family and community, and this situation was proving more complicated than she had imagined. "It is difficult," she admitted. "I do not want to disappoint my family, but I also do not want to give up the trust and comfort I have found here." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are not giving up anything. You are learning to navigate both worlds, and we will respect the boundaries that must exist, while still maintaining what is meaningful to us." Despite their careful planning, misunderstandings began to surface. One afternoon, a neighbor passing by the farm saw the girl working alongside the farmer and interpreted their cooperation as something inappropriate. By evening, rumors had spread through the small town. Whispers of impropriety reached her family, adding tension and stress. The Apache girl felt torn between her loyalty to her community and her growing trust in the farmer. At home, she spoke to the farmer about the pressure she was feeling. "They do not understand," she said, frustration mixed with sadness. "They see what they want to see, not what is real. I feel caught between my responsibilities and my own choices." He listened carefully, offering calm support. "It is not easy to balance expectations and personal connections," he said, "but what is important is that we remain honest and respectful, while protecting the trust we have built." Their next encounters became more cautious. She visited less frequently, and when she did, they remained mindful of appearances. The tension of scrutiny made every gesture and word carry weight. Small actions that were once simple, a shared laugh, helping with a chore, now required careful consideration. Both of them felt the strain, yet neither wanted to let go of the bond they had nurtured. During one of her visits, a misunderstanding occurred that threatened to unravel the progress they had made. The Apache girl arrived earlier than usual, hoping to assist with feeding the animals, but a miscommunication about chores led to a small argument. She felt he was questioning her abilities, while he believed she was disregarding his instructions. For the first time, frustration and emotion created a distance between them. "I am trying to help," she exclaimed, exasperation in her voice. "I do not understand why you are upset, and I am only asking for the work to be done carefully," he replied, his own voice tight with concern. "I trust you, but mistakes can be costly." They both paused, realizing the argument was unnecessary, a result of stress and external pressures rather than true conflict. She lowered her gaze, ashamed, and he softened his tone. "We both care about this farm, and about each other," he said. "We cannot let misunderstandings ruin what we have built." Over time, they learned to navigate these challenges together. They found ways to maintain boundaries while still sharing moments of connection. The Apache girl began to assert herself gently within her community, explaining that her visits to the farm were based on friendship and shared trust. Though not everyone understood, she earned respect for her honesty and maturity. The farmer, too, learned to anticipate these challenges, adjusting his behavior to avoid unnecessary scrutiny while remaining true to his principles. Cultural differences, while subtle, occasionally caused friction. The Apache girl's sense of duty and tradition sometimes clashed with the farmer's independent, solitary lifestyle. Decisions that seemed natural to him, staying longer on the farm, sharing tasks freely, could be interpreted differently in her world, where appearances and community expectations mattered. They had to navigate these differences carefully, learning to communicate openly and compromise when necessary. One evening, as they sat together after finishing chores, she spoke quietly about the pressures she felt. "Sometimes, I wonder if it is possible to balance my own happiness with the expectations of others," she said. "I do not want to disappoint anyone, but I also do not want to lose the trust and understanding we share." He nodded thoughtfully. "It is a difficult balance," he said, "but you have grown stronger because of it. You are learning to set boundaries without shutting out connection, and that is a rare and valuable skill." Their conversations became a space for reflection, where they could discuss not only the practical challenges of daily life but also the emotional complexities they faced. They spoke about fear, judgment, and the ways society sometimes misinterprets human connection. Through these dialogues, their bond deepened, as they both realized that emotional resilience required patience, empathy, and courage. Despite the challenges, moments of joy persisted. They continued to share laughter, quiet companionship, and small victories on the farm. A stubborn horse finally trained, a field repaired before the storm arrived, a hearty meal prepared together. These accomplishments strengthened their trust and reminded them that connection was worth the effort, even when external pressures threatened to interfere. The Apache girl also began to notice subtle changes in herself. She felt more confident, asserting her own needs and expressing her feelings, both with the farmer and within her community. She learned that respect and understanding could be mutual, that trust was not a one-way street, and that emotional honesty could coexist with cultural expectations. For the farmer, the challenges reinforced the value of patience and empathy. He learned to anticipate her concerns, offer support without judgment, and recognize the influence of external pressures on their connection. He realized that love and friendship were not only about shared moments of joy but also about facing difficulties together, with understanding and care. One particularly tense day, a misunderstanding with a neighbor escalated into a confrontation. The Apache girl, frustrated and defensive, felt the weight of expectations pressing down on her. The farmer intervened calmly, diffusing the situation with clear, respectful communication. Afterwards, she looked at him with admiration and gratitude. "I do not know what I would do without you," she said softly. "You would be fine," he replied gently. "You are stronger than you know, but we are stronger together." These words became a mantra for them both. They realized that external judgment and cultural expectations would always exist, but their bond, built on trust, respect, and emotional connection, was resilient. They learned to face challenges together, balancing personal desires with societal pressures and emerging stronger for it. As the weeks passed, their relationship evolved. The Apache girl became more comfortable in asserting her independence, and the farmer became more open to emotional vulnerability. They found ways to navigate cultural barriers without sacrificing the integrity of their connection. Small victories, moments of understanding, and shared experiences continued to deepen their bond, proving that trust and care could survive even in challenging circumstances. By the end of this period, both of them recognized the growth that had occurred. The Apache girl felt empowered to navigate her community's expectations while maintaining meaningful connections outside it. The farmer, in turn, understood that vulnerability and trust were not weaknesses, but sources of strength and resilience. Together, they had faced conflict, judgment, and misunderstanding, and their bond had emerged stronger and more profound. In the quiet of the farm, as the sun set and the sky filled with soft hues of orange and purple, they sat together in reflective silence. The world outside might judge, misunderstand, or challenge them, but within their shared space, trust, respect, and care prevailed. They had learned that connection required courage, patience, and empathy, and that true understanding was a treasure worth protecting. Even with cultural and societal barriers pressing on them, They had discovered that emotional intimacy and friendship could thrive, quietly and resiliently, in the midst of challenge. Their journey was far from over, but they had proven that when two people care deeply for each other, they can face almost any obstacle together. And in that realization, there was hope, a promise that connection, understanding, and mutual respect could endure, even in a world filled with challenges. The months passed slowly, marked by the rhythm of the farm and the changing seasons. Spring turned into summer, and the fields grew green and vibrant under the careful attention of the farmer and the Apache girl. Their bond, tested by challenges, strengthened with each shared experience. They had faced misunderstandings, cultural barriers, and external judgment. But through patience and trust, their connection had grown into something steady and enduring. One early morning, the Apache girl arrived at the farmhouse, carrying a small bundle of freshly picked herbs and wildflowers. She paused at the edge of the field, taking in the rising sun. The light cast a warm glow across the land, illuminating the familiar fences, the animals grazing peacefully, and the farmhouse that had become a shared space of trust and companionship. She felt a quiet sense of comfort, knowing that here, with the farmer, she could be herself, without fear or pretense. The farmer noticed her approach and waved. "Good morning," he called. "The animals are eager to see you again." She smiled, a mix of warmth and shyness. "Good morning," she replied. "I brought some herbs. I thought you might like them for cooking." He accepted the gift with gratitude. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful of you." They moved through the farm together, completing their daily chores. The morning was filled with shared laughter, small competitions, and quiet moments of cooperation. A stubborn goat resisted their efforts to guide it into the pen, prompting playful teasing and gentle scolding. A basket of eggs tipped slightly as they carried it, and they worked together to steady it, laughing at their clumsiness. These simple interactions, once ordinary, now carried layers of meaning, reinforcing their trust, cooperation, and emotional intimacy. As the day progressed, they sat down beneath a large oak tree, taking a break from work. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting dancing shadows across the ground. She spoke of her family, sharing updates about their daily lives and the small changes within her community. He listened attentively, offering advice only when asked, and simply providing his presence when words were unnecessary. "You've taught me a lot," she said quietly. "Not just about farming or patience, but about trust, friendship, and the courage to open up to someone. I never realized how important that could be." He nodded thoughtfully. "And you've taught me something too. You've shown me that even after years of solitude, connection is still possible. That trust can grow slowly, carefully, and become something meaningful. You've reminded me that life isn't just about routines and work, it's about shared moments, understanding, and the care we offer each other." Their conversation drifted toward dreams and aspirations. She spoke of wanting to explore beyond the boundaries of her community, to learn new skills, and to experience life in ways she had never imagined. He shared his hopes of maintaining the farm, ensuring it remained a place of stability and growth, and finding small joys in daily accomplishments. Through these discussions, they discovered that while their paths were different, their values were aligned: respect, resilience, and the desire for meaningful connection. Evenings became a special time for reflection and companionship. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they would sit on the porch steps, watching the animals settle down and the fields take on a golden hue. Words were often unnecessary. The silence was comfortable, filled with mutual understanding and the quiet reassurance of presence. It was during these moments that they realized the depth of their bond, a connection that had survived challenges, judgment, and distance, yet continued to flourish. One evening, after a long day of work, she turned to him and said, "I feel grateful for your patience, your understanding, and the way you've allowed me to be myself. I never expected to find this kind of friendship, this kind of trust." He looked at her, moved by her sincerity. "And I feel the same." You've brought life and warmth into a routine that could have become monotonous. You've reminded me that connection, even subtle, can transform our lives. It's not just companionship, it's understanding, respect, and the courage to share our vulnerabilities. Through shared experiences, they learned that emotional connection was not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about small acts of care, consistency, and mutual respect. A shared meal, a gentle word, a hand offered during a task, these were the moments that mattered most. They discovered that true intimacy was built over time, nurtured by patience, empathy, and honesty. The Apache girl also began to navigate her community's expectations with greater confidence. She explained that her visits to the farm were based on friendship, trust, and shared experiences. And gradually, those around her began to understand. While not everyone fully accepted her choices, they respected her honesty and the clear boundaries she maintained. This newfound confidence allowed her to embrace her individuality without guilt, finding balance between personal fulfillment and communal responsibility. The farmer, in turn, grew more comfortable with vulnerability. He learned to express care without fear of judgment, to offer guidance without dominance, and to trust that his feelings and intentions could be understood. Through the Apache girl's presence, he discovered that opening up did not diminish strength, but rather enhanced it, creating a foundation for meaningful connection. Their relationship remained tender and nuanced. There were moments of laughter, shared victories, and quiet reflection, as well as moments of challenge and learning. They navigated cultural differences, societal expectations, and personal insecurities with care, finding compromise without sacrificing their values or emotional connection. The bond they had nurtured had become resilient, capable of withstanding obstacles while continuing to grow. One particularly beautiful evening, as the sky darkened and stars began to appear, they sat together in comfortable silence. The Apache girl leaned slightly closer, resting her hand near his. There was no rush, no pressure, only the quiet understanding that they had found something rare and valuable. They had discovered that connection was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it was the quiet moments, the shared understanding, and the gentle presence that mattered most. "I've learned so much from you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "about trust, patience, and the courage to be myself. I hope I've given you something in return." "You have," he replied gently, "more than you know. You've reminded me that even after years of solitude, life can surprise us with connection, understanding, and care. You've shown me that trust, once earned, is one of the strongest bonds we can experience." As the night deepened, they continued to talk, sharing stories of hope, dreams, and lessons learned. They reflected on the journey that had brought them together, from the first cautious encounter to the steady, meaningful bond they now shared. Each challenge, misunderstanding, and moment of vulnerability had contributed to the trust and respect that defined their relationship. The farm, once a place of quiet routine, had become a space of growth, learning, and emotional connection. Together, they had built a partnership rooted in honesty, empathy, and mutual support. It was a bond that would continue to evolve, shaped by shared experiences, understanding, and the quiet courage to maintain their connection despite external pressures. As dawn approached, the Apache girl prepared to leave, though she lingered a moment longer than usual. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything, for understanding, for patience, and for helping me see that connection is worth the effort." He smiled, a gentle warmth in his eyes. "And thank you for reminding me that even in solitude, life can bring companionship, understanding, and moments that matter. You've changed my world in the quietest and best ways." They parted with a sense of hope and continuity. Their bond, though tested by challenges and cultural expectations, had endured and grown stronger. Both understood that connection required effort, patience, and respect. Yet the rewards were profound. They had learned that emotional intimacy, trust, and friendship could flourish, even in difficult circumstances, and that true understanding was a treasure to protect. As the Apache girl walked back toward her community, and the farmer returned to his work, both carried with them a quiet sense of fulfillment. The experiences they had shared, challenges faced, lessons learned, and moments of joy had left a lasting impression. They had discovered that life, even in solitude, could offer deep connections, and that trust and understanding were foundations upon which meaningful relationships could grow. In the weeks and months that followed, their bond remained a steady presence in their lives. They continued to share moments of care, laughter, and support, nurturing a connection that was both resilient and enduring. And though the future remained uncertain, one truth was clear. Through patience, empathy, and respect, they had created a relationship that was rare, meaningful, and life-changing. The story of the lone farmer and the Apache girl did not end with a dramatic declaration or sudden resolution. It ended with something far more enduring, a quiet, steadfast bond built on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. A bond that reminded them both that even in a world filled with challenges, human connection, patience, and care could flourish, transforming lives in the most profound ways. And so, under the vast sky, surrounded by the fields and animals they tended together, they continued their lives not perfect, not without challenges, but richer for the friendship, trust, and understanding they had cultivated. It was a life grounded in reality, strengthened by shared experiences, and illuminated by the quiet promise of connection, hope, and enduring companionship.